Hey, it's Zane. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. In today's video, I want to talk about Bitcoin self-custody, why this is so important, and I want to talk about why Bitcoin gives you and I the opportunity, the first monetary instrument that gives us the opportunity to be in complete control of our wealth, to be our own bank, to be detached from the central control system, to own our money, spend our money without counterparty or permission required. And unlike having your money in a bank where there is significant counterparty to your wealth, with Bitcoin, we have an opportunity to be our own bank. And this is a really important thing to understand, particularly in this environment that we're in, where every single day now we're hearing, and I'm getting feedback from people during my one-on-one Zoom calls, my consultations, where people are telling me they're having trouble getting their money out of their bank to onboard into either Bitcoin, other assets. Some people are looking to send their money overseas, and they're getting the third degree by their bank. And this should be a red flag for you. This should be a warning sign of things to come. And like I said a few days ago in one of my videos, I really believe that the lockdowns that we experienced just 4 or 5 years ago, this time is going to be a different type of lockdown. We're going to experience what's known as financial lockdowns. And if you can start putting two and two together, you'll realize that this is what's coming. The Reserve Bank of Australia has been working behind the scenes on programmable money, a form of central bank digital currency. In Europe, they're bringing out central bank digital currencies in October. This should be very concerning for you, because the minute that your financial life is tied to an app that controls and surveils all of your spending habits, that is tied to your digital ID, to your social credit score, to your spending patterns, to your carbon credits, all of these kinds of things, when you start to understand how a system like that works, you begin to realize that that is the end of freedom as we know it. As soon as you lose autonomy in your financial life, that is really the beginning of the end in terms of your freedoms. And I know a lot of people don't care about this. They think this is something that should not be concerned about because they're good citizens and all of that, and I get all that. But imagine the first time that you go to put diesel in your truck, or to buy, some extra grass-fed beef or whatever for the month, and the system tells you that unfortunately you've exceeded your quota for the month, or you've traveled too far so you can't book any more flights because it's tied to your allotment for your carbon credits. And this is the kind of thing, as crazy as it sounds, this is what it's all about. And so you have to start to ask yourself, what is the alternative? And the alternative, in simple terms, is Bitcoin in self-custody. And so I want to explain to you how this works and just give you a top-level understanding of self-custody Bitcoin, and why ultimately, if you don't own the keys to your own Bitcoin, you essentially don't own your Bitcoin when push comes to shove. And I'll explain why here in a moment. But point number one I want to share with you here is there's a rule in Bitcoin, and it really is the first and most important rule, and that is to understand not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin. And I want you to really have that statement embedded in your brain if you're getting involved in Bitcoin. Not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the ultimate bearer asset. A bearer asset is an asset that, so long as you hold it in your own custody, you own it. Nobody can take it off you unless you give that asset up voluntarily. And this is what Bitcoin is. It is a bearer asset that you own the keys to. Now, what I mean by that is, if you can imagine the Bitcoin blockchain as being just this giant, immutable indestructible ledger that sits in cyberspace. And on that ledger, there are all these rows of safety deposit boxes. When you open a Bitcoin wallet for the first time, you will receive what is known as a 12-word or a 24-word seed phrase. But for the sake of today, let's just assume you select the option for only a 12-word seed phrase. So you essentially, by receiving that 12-word seed phrase, you now have what's known as a private key. You have a key to access one safety deposit box on the Bitcoin ledger, on the blockchain. So by opening a wallet, any kind of wallet for the first time, you now have effectively generated for yourself a key to one safety deposit box on the Bitcoin blockchain. What does this mean? It means that any Bitcoin that enters that safety deposit box that you buy from an exchange, from a broker, or that somebody sends to you, or that you send to yourself from another wallet that you may have, once the Bitcoin enters that safety deposit box, it belongs to you. Not by name, it doesn't have your name on it, it has a wallet address that is tied to your private key. And so long as you own the key to that vault that houses your Bitcoin, life's good. Nobody can take it away from you. And so how do people lose their Bitcoin? They lose their Bitcoin because they have it sitting inside someone else's safety deposit box, a third party's safety deposit box, an exchange's safety deposit box, or they don't practice security around the 12 words that generate their private key. And so those words get lost, they forget them, somebody steals them. That's how people lose their Bitcoin. That's the only way. And so it's really important to understand, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. You need to be the custodian of the key to your Bitcoin vault or safety deposit box that sits on the blockchain. For as long as your Bitcoin is sitting on an exchange, any kind of exchange, I don't care which one it is, there are good exchanges, there are bad exchanges, but any kind of exchange that your Bitcoin is sitting on, any full service brokerage that your Bitcoin is sitting with, it is not a good long-term solution. You want to be taking your Bitcoin from their custody, because remember, for as long as the Bitcoin is sitting with that third party, it is not sitting in your safety deposit box, it is sitting in their safety deposit box. And even though you may have your name on it because you have an account with that institution, if something goes wrong with that institution, everything inside the safety deposit box that they control is at risk. And so, I'll say it one more time, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. If you want to be self-sovereign, if you want to be autonomous, if you want to be your own bank, if you want to eliminate counterparty from your life, if you don't want to be subjected to monetary surveillance, you have to self-custody your Bitcoin. That's point number one. Number two, when you take your Bitcoin into self-custody, you also eliminate the attack vectors associated with having your Bitcoin on an exchange. Now, we have seen around the world during different cycles, Bitcoin operates on a 4-year halving cycle, and typically there's a period, which we're about to enter now, where there's a lot of euphoria in the market and a lot of capital rotating into Bitcoin. And exchanges that practice with a lot of leverage and play a lot of casino games and trade in a lot of different cryptocurrencies and practice lending and all of those kinds of things that people get swept up in during a bull market, eventually they don't end well. And so in that environment, you do not want your precious digital real estate, your pristine collateral, your Bitcoin, caught up in that kind of environment and potential collapse. Now, we saw in the last few years the likes of FTX which was a very prominent sponsor of stadiums and the Formula One, and everybody thought they were fine, but they weren't fine. They were led by a guy who's now in jail. FTX collapsed. A lot of people lost their money and their Bitcoin because they entrusted that institution with the custody of their Bitcoin. Anybody who bought Bitcoin through FTX would not have had a problem had they taken their Bitcoin, once they purchased it through FTX, from FTX's custody into their own self-custody. And this is why I always say, if you're going to buy Bitcoin, you need to utilize an exchange or a broker typically to buy it. That's very normal. But just don't have a long-term plan to leave it there for months on end. You want to be moving to self-custody sooner rather than later. So you minimize those attack vectors, the risk of collapse, nefarious actors, these entities getting way in above their head, playing all sorts of funny games with people's money. And essentially what you're doing is you're removing third-party risk, things that you can't control. Now, the other point I want to make around self-custody is there are multiple levels to self-custody. Now, this is not to confuse you. I don't want to get too in-depth here in this conversation, and I certainly am not here to overwhelm you. But there are different levels to self-custody that, in my view, need to evolve with the value of your Bitcoin holdings. And it's really important to understand that if you agree that Bitcoin is pristine digital real estate, as Michael Saylor often refers to it as digital Manhattan, it's like owning one portion or 1/21 millionth, because there's 21 million blocks of Bitcoin. You get to own 1/21 millionth if you're able to get to one whole Bitcoin in digital Manhattan. And he makes it or draws the analogy of buying a block of land or a plot of land in Manhattan 200 years ago, and you look at the value of that today. And on top of those blocks, there are all these incredible skyscrapers that have been built, apartments and retail stores and you name it. And the same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin. There'll be people who own a whole Bitcoin or more, and they'll own several blocks of digital real estate, and then on top of that we're going to have all of these layer 2 solutions and different products that are going to come into play. Bitcoin is not just a monetary instrument, it's going to transition into an industry. Let me get back to my point. If you agree that Bitcoin is pristine digital real estate, and that's what I believe that it is, and then you compare that to conventional real estate, and let's say a perfect piece of beachfront property, the thing to understand and ask yourself is, if you buy a piece of pristine beachfront property, what are the costs associated with buying and maintaining that piece of real estate? Well, you and I both know the answer to that. There's stamp duty to buy it, there's maintenance costs, there's insurance, there's land tax if you're using it as an investment, there's stamp duties which we have no control over how much they are from year to year. There's all these costs associated with maintaining a piece of pristine real estate in the real world. With Bitcoin, we don't have any of that, and we certainly don't have any depreciation of the building either. And we don't have any of that. But what we do have, in my view, is an obligation to ourselves. If we believe in Bitcoin, we've done the work on it, and we know what it represents and where this is going and what it promises us over the long term in terms of wealth acceleration and wealth protection, does it not make sense to allocate a small portion of the value of your stack to education and security? Education and security, because in my mind that is your insurance. And pick a number, could be 2%, 3%, 5% of your Bitcoin stack that you should be dedicating to the right hardware, the right education, the right protocols in place in order to protect your Bitcoin. So if you've got $100,000 worth of Bitcoin today, maybe you should consider investing up to $5,000 to protect it. That's my point. Let me know what you think about that in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So in Bitcoin, every wallet essentially works the same. It generates for you that private key from a 12-word seed phrase. However, if you go to the App Store and you download a Bitcoin wallet, such as a Proton wallet, Aqua wallet, Blue wallet, there's a number of good Bitcoin-only wallets out there that I'd recommend, and you set yourself up with a Bitcoin wallet, which you can do in under 5 minutes, why is it that you wouldn't store your life savings on that type of wallet? And the answer to the question is because that key to your vault, your Bitcoin vault, which is going to store your Bitcoin, has been generated in an online environment. There's no hardware. It's been generated in a completely online environment. It is purely software, an application for either your phone or your desktop computer. And anything that's generated in an online environment, anything, there is always the remote chance that there is some form of cyber threat associated with that. And so if you have your key to your pristine digital real estate generated in that environment, there's always the very remote chance that your Bitcoin key could be compromised. Not to be alarming, I'm not aware of a situation where that has happened. Certainly has never happened to me, but it could happen. And this is why we have what's known as cold storage, because cold storage involves two items, software and also hardware. And it's the hardware that generates the private key. Okay, so the reason why you would always go for cold storage, which involves software plus hardware, for a long-term savings account, a significant allocation to Bitcoin, an SMSF, a retirement account. The reason why you would always go with cold storage for that kind of application or purpose is because the key to your Bitcoin vault or safety deposit box has been generated in a completely offline environment, never exposed to the internet. And by the very nature of that, you eliminate that potential to have your seed phrase, your private key, compromised. So that's the difference between what's known as a software or a hot wallet and a cold storage wallet. Really important to understand the distinction between the two. So the hot wallets are definitely useful, and you can definitely have a few $100s or maybe even up to a few $1,000s on there. And as time goes on and we transition into a circular economy where more and more merchants are going to offer customers the opportunity to pay in Bitcoin, you're going to want to use hot wallets because you don't want to be carrying around your hardware device to send a transaction. You'll be able to just utilize an app on your phone to pay for a coffee, to pay your hairdresser, to pay the mechanic, whatever it might be. Because this is what I believe is coming in the next few years with Bitcoin. I believe we're going to transition from this euphoric phase around Bitcoin being the ultimate store of value into medium of exchange, where the parallel circular economy is really going to start to take shape. It's already happening in America, and what we know, America sneezes, Australia eventually catches a cold, eventually, even though we're pretty slow off the mark. We have to have all eyes on America right now, and this is what's happening. So, I think I'll leave it there today because I've given you enough insight to really contemplate and consider. If you need to book a call with me, we can go even deeper on this. I can recommend the best devices, wallets, setup that's based on your goals and your situation. Whether you're just getting started in Bitcoin, whether you're already on your way, maybe you've made some mistakes, maybe you want me to assess the current setup that you have, I can certainly guide you with what I've done, what I'm doing, what I would recommend that you do based on your situation. These are the conversations I have every single day with people from all walks of life. So if you need to book a call, you'll see a link in the show notes below. I'd love to meet you on Zoom. Sessions typically go for 45 minutes to an hour, and I know that you'll get tremendous value from that. You only need to look at the feedback on my booking page. You'll see the plethora of reviews that people write following calls that they have with me, because I help take complex things and make them simple so that you know the simple next best steps. I'm going to leave it there today. Just remember, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Really focus on cold storage when it comes to your long-term Bitcoin holdings. Do it right, and just understand that where you start is not necessarily where you're going to end up. Self-custody and having a robust setup where you can put your head on your pillow at night and know that you are the head of security of your own financial life. You are your own bank, and you also have a succession plan in place in the event that something happens to you. That is a really powerful thing, because I do believe we're going to enter a phase very soon where getting your money out of a traditional or a commercial bank is going to be a problem. We're already seeing this, and this is why we Bitcoin. This is why Bitcoin exists. It's why it came out on the back of the GFC in 2008. It's taken us 16 years to figure out what this thing is. Now it's an idea whose time has come. Hope you got some value today. Please share your thoughts in the comments. One last time, if you've been sitting on the fence about booking a call with me, don't wait. It'll be the best hour you've ever spent. I guarantee it when it comes to your Bitcoin and getting clarity for the future. Book a call and we'll go through it from there. Thanks so much. Appreciate you being here. This is Zane signing out. Bye for now.